Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to explore Docs as Code, a popular approach to managing engineering documentation at scale. So in this video, we will cover what is Docs as Code, what was its inception, why is it important, what are the benefits, how to set up a standard Docs as Code workflow, how are big companies like Google and Spotify doing it. To start with, let's define what Docs as Code is. It is an approach that treats documentation just like any other piece of code or software. You integrate documentation with the software development process so that you can manage and review documentation and deploy it very similar to how you handle code. Okay, now, let's get into the history and the inception of the concept of docs as code. Back in 2015, Google faced a lot of challenges with its internal engineering documentation. With around like 15,000 engineers, documentation was essential, but it was a very difficult task. Engineers at that time were writing their own documentation and they were responsible for the content that they wrote about the code that they had written. So it was a very fragmented landscape. Imagine the sheer scale of 1,000, 10,000 people, each writing their own documentation with their own tools and technologies. It will be very inconsistent and inefficient. To solve this problem, the team at Google, Riona and her team, they developed the concept of docs as code. It means that documentation would be treated like code. You follow similar processes, you set up practices and adhere to it. Now that we have established what docs as code is, we'll have a look at some of the key principles that form the basis of this concept. So, the first point or the first challenge that we discussed previously was that the documentation was following its own process, its own timeline, and it was very separated from the code software development lifecycle itself. So the first step would be to integrate it with code. And then now that we are following the same timeline and the same process as how code is reviewed or how code changes are merged, it is it is possible that we publish documentation like we publish code. That is, you use a versioning tool, you do peer review before committing the changes to the version control system, and you enable automatic deployment with CI/CD pipelines so that it follows the same life cycle as your a piece of code does. Now, Docusaurus is a great example for documentation as code tool. So I have their docs page open. To if you take a look at the documentation for Docusaurus itself, you can see that they're using their own tool to power their documentation. So it's a great example of what the product can do. If you search for the keyword tech docs on Google, you will see a lot of product documentation showing up, and each of these documentation are built through software, docs as code concept. Tech docs for Broadcom, for example, you can see it's more like a website by itself, and you're able to search for any documentation that you need. Backstage, for example, I think they're using Docusaurus as well, so you'll be able to contribute, see commit history, and do search for whatever content that you or example or question that you want to be answered. Gitbook, which is another example of a documentation as code tool, you can see that they have a lot of integrations with other products. So you can set up an entire pipeline like from any tool that you're already using and integrate it with documentation with very easily. So far, we have looked at what is Docs as code, how did it come about, what are the benefits, what are the popular tools in the ecosystem. So, the next question would be, why choose this approach to solve all your problems with respect to engineering documentation? So, the first reason would be Docs as code makes it searchable. If your engineering documentation keeps growing, Docs as code makes it easy to find what you're looking for. Which brings us to the next reason, which is findability. If you don't know what you're searching for, what is the solution to your problem, Docs as code makes it easy to discover the solution to your problem. And the third reason, maintainability. As the code base grows, the documentation also will grow along with it. So Docs as code makes it easy to maintain, fix, update documentation. So this is the complete video on Docs as code. I hope it was helpful in you know uh, clarifying some of the doubts you had with respect to the concept. If it was helpful, please let me know. Thank you.